Hi, welcome back to Personal History. I'm Matt Staley. In this episode, entitled The Master Welder and the Rocket Scientist, it is once again about my maternal grandfather, Ben Ramsire. In this story, he ends up going to New Mexico to take a leave from work and has some unexpected developments with some more famous people than himself. I hope you enjoy this. If you like this channel and enjoy videos like this, please consider subscribing and liking the video. Thank you very much, and enjoy.
How long have I been talking?
15 minutes.
Oh, come on.
Well, maybe 16. Tell me about when you were in New Mexico, working at the research facility there at Las Cruces.
So anyway, I worked so many hours that my neighbor was sickly, and he was going to go to the doctor, and I liked him in Akron. I had Akron General Hospital. So I took him, and he didn't seem to be too sickly to me. And when I got in there, the specialist checked him, but he became more interested in me than he did the patient then. And he checked me over real good, and he said, "Now, what do you do?" I told him. He says, "Well, do you work at something had a lot of responsibility and a lot of hard work?" I said, "I work a lot of hours." And how I would stay and work over. And he says, he says, "I'm going to tell you just like it is. If you don't take a rest and get your health back, you're not going to be around long." And I said, "What?" He says, "That's right." He says, "You need to get a 6 months break and rest, and I didn't know what, or you're not going to be around long." Well, here was a strange specialist telling me that, and the fellow that I took looked at him and me both and was real surprised. And I told him that I couldn't, but anyway, through him, that the company that I worked for gave me a 6 months leave of absence to go to New Mexico, or Arizona, for a rest stop. Well, I didn't know what to do, so I told my wife Laura, and she agreed we'd sell the place and just do what that specialist said to do. Because I'd lost weight, and I didn't realize I'd looked that bad until I look at some of the pictures now, and I realized why he said it. So I started Arizona, bought a nice 3-room mobile home, pulled it with my 41 Buick, just a real good car. And I stopped to stay all night in Las Cruces, New Mexico. In Las Cruces, New Mexico, I met some people that were up in Michigan where I had worked, and we got acquainted, and they persuaded me. They said, "Well, the climate here, you wouldn't find it any better than it is right here in Las Cruces. It's only 40 miles out of Mexico, and stay for just a couple, 3 days." Well, I said, "All right, I'm just killing time anyway." So in a day or two, I went up to the employment office, and they just wanted to give me a job right there. And they said, "Well, we'll send you down to talk to this man." And I went down, and it was Fred's welding shop. And he talked to me, and he said, "What can you do?" And I said, "I can show you better than I can tell you." I said, "I'll work for you a day, and if I can do the work to suit you." Well, before the day was over, at half of the day, he came down and told me, he says, "I'll tell you what I'll do." He says, "I will give you half of everything you make here and furnish all the tools and pay you at the end of every day." Well, I never had a job like that, so I grabbed onto that, and I worked for about a month. And one day, where I had my mobile home parked, there was an officer from White Sands Proving Ground at Las Cruces rocket range, come down talking to me, and he says, "Who done that work on your car? Putting that trailer hitch on there and all that." I said, "Well, I did." And he says, "You mean you welded that and designed that and put that on there?" I said, "Well, yes." He says, "I'll tell you what, we need you at White Sands Proving Grounds because we're doing a lot of experimental." He says, "Will you go out there with me and look at it just to see what it's like and if you would like it and so on?" I said, "Well, yeah." So I rode out with him. He took me to the employment office. He took me into the employment office and they interviewed me and offered me a job right then, and I accepted it. So I didn't realize that they was in experimental stage to begin to develop a rocket to carry weights into space. And I didn't realize that the man that was mostly in charge of that and run it was the greatest rocket scientist that Adolf Hitler ever had, Dr. Werner von Braun. Dr. Werner von Braun would go out to the range, and I done a couple jobs for him, and after that he took me right out when we discharged one of the big German V2 rockets, and he was fixing it to carry more of a load and more of a load. And then one day I was there in the welding shop, and a scientist come in that worked for Douglas Aircraft Company from Monarch, California. And him and the man in charge of the welding shop was having quite a discussion. And I heard the man in charge of the welding shop tell him, says, "Why, we don't have a man here that can make that." And he got real put out. He says, "Well, we've got to have it because we're working on the WAC Corporal 2 rocket to shoot down aircraft." And says, "We've got to have it." And after this man in the welding shop couldn't get it rid of him, he said, "You see that fellow over there at the welding table? That's, I don't know what he's doing, but he's always making something." Said he could come the closest to making that of anybody we have. So he come over to me and he told me what his problem was. He spread his blueprints there down on my steel welding table. And I looked at it. He said, "You think you could make that?" I said, "Well, of course I could make that." I said, "But that's a big job." I said, "I don't think I could make that in 4 hours." He said, "I don't care if it takes 4 days. We have to have that." He says, "Will you try it?" Well, I said, "Of course." And in 3 hours and a half, I had that made. On one end, it was off 1/32 of an inch, and he couldn't believe it. And he looked at it, and he wanted to hire me right then to go to Santa Monica, California, and work for Douglas Aircraft. Well, that was real tempting, so I told him, "Well, I just believe I'll take you up on that, but I'll talk to my wife." So I talked to my wife. Well, she, whatever I want to do. Well, anyway, I got to thinking of a lot of things to be involved. I didn't know any about there and so on. And I didn't go. I finished my time up there working under the direction of Dr. Werner von Braun. Now, Dr. Werner von Braun was the most brilliant man that I ever worked under. Werner von Braun, a lot of people don't know, but he married his cousin on his mother's side of the family. While he worked there, he wrote a letter to Germany, and she agreed to marry him, and they give him a 3 or 4 day leave of absence there from White Sands Proving Ground, and he went to Germany and married his cousin on his mother's side of the family. I learned later that they had 2 little girls and a little boy, and since I worked there, I've wondered if those kids turned out to be as brilliant as their father, Hitler's top rocket scientist, because Hitler had put him in jail when he saw he was going to lose the war. And as soon as Hitler was committed suicide, I think, as soon as the German people let him out, and when they let him out, he wanted to come to America, and Russia wanted him. But we ended up getting him, And a lot of people don't know it, but Werner von Braun became a naturalized American citizen. He was born in 1912, and he died of cancer in 1975. And I've thought of him so often. There's so much that I knew about him and the happenings that you don't get out of the newspaper and out of the book. One thing I learned there, though, that the government is not as secret as what a lot of people would like to believe. They would take me in about once a month and ask me all kind of questions to see if I'd lied the first time, and give me information that I wasn't even supposed to tell my wife, and some little Mexican kid down in Las Cruces would turn around and ask me about it. That's how secret it was. It was, sometimes it was funny, but it wasn't funny at all. And I then came back to when my 6 months was up, I came back to Rittman, Ohio, and they put me to work up in the gluing department redesigning the machine.